So today I actually have a pretty cool call lined up, something that we should have done for a long time. Dorn says a digital nomad lifestyle. Yeah, it is. It is the nomad lifestyle if you want it, right? A nomad lifestyle for some of you could be very different than it is for me. It doesn't have to be that you travel around a lot. It's not for Tom. Tom enjoys having the freedom to spend more time with his family, spend more time with his kids rather than being at, the 9 to 5 restaurant manager job that he was at before, and a big part of this business model is sales and prospecting, bringing in clients, whether it's, you're selling websites, whether you're selling, SEO or ads, it doesn't really matter. You need to be out there reaching out to businesses. And that is going to be, what is going to keep your business going. If you're, going day in and day out without having conversations with business owners, very unlikely that you're going to get more customers. And so today I have Megan here with us, who I don't think any of you have met before. Hey, Megan.
Hi, everybody.
So Megan is, she is our top saleswoman for the agency. And she's been with, how long have you been with us for now, Megan? It's time is flying by.
4 months.
4 months. 4 months. So not a whole lot of time, but she's been doing some amazing things. And so, I'm super stoked to be able to bring her on this call with all of you because, number one, she's reaching out to businesses every day. She's very good at it. She's gotten a lot of traction. She didn't start out doing that. She grew her skill set and has come up with a very strategic way to be consistent with what she's doing. And I thought it would be great to bring her here and have a conversation about, number one, that, but then also a little bit about how, how we started working together, because I know a lot of you are looking to hire salespeople yourselves as well. So can you guys put a 1 in the chat if you are somebody that's interested in hiring a salesperson, or maybe a 2 if you're doing the sales stuff yourself? Both are fine. Some of you have the sales skill set. I know Norm is doing sales. I see number of 1s coming in. Antonio says 2. So Antonio is going to be doing sales himself. Cool. So yeah, this call is really just going to be, a chance to share some insight and how we got this process going, what it looks like now, what it looked like in the beginning, and then we'll have an opportunity to do some like Q&A too to help maybe fill some of the blanks in for any of you that are looking to hire. So does that sound good, everybody? Good format thus far? Okay, so cool. So what I'm going to do is just ask Megan to unmute and just kind of have some casual conversation in terms of like what we did, when we first started working together. And I guess just to start, Megan, we had caught up yesterday, and man, it had actually been, how long has it been since we got on a phone call together?
I think I actually did talk to you last week briefly, but usually like every week or so.
Every week or so we have maybe a phone call to catch up, and usually it's like questions around some of the stuff that she's selling for us or some objections that she's having with some clients. So and of course we do have back and forth in Slack, right? So there's a conversation and dialogue going on there, but the reason I asked that is just because like I want you all to know, like it's not, there's not like an ongoing, like we're not meeting every single day, we're not talking all of the time. If you are looking to have somebody help you with sales, you don't have to have that happen, because that's what I thought. I had this idea in my mind that, this is going to be, hiring salespeople was going to be like daily meetings all the time, but that's not what it is. So anyway, that being said, you were yesterday, you were talking about some of these prospects that you have. And I know that you had some deals in the queue yesterday. Did anything look promising? I saw some invoices go out.
Yes. So I did have one that came back. I had the invoice coming yesterday in the contract. I just texted her this morning. She hadn't sent that portion back, so she just sent it. So I was going to tell you that after this call.
Oh, okay. So,
yes.
And what kind of client was that?
So she's going to be doing just strictly SEO to start.
She's doing strictly SEO. Okay, cool. And what price point did you bring her in on?
$997.
Okay, 997 a month. And then what kind of business? And then how did you get in touch with them?
So they're a pressure washing business. They strictly focus on commercial pressure washing. And
Mhm.
I had met them initially probably about 5 years ago at like a trade show. And
Mhm.
we had worked together in the past, but I just kind of kept hammering them. And it took about 2 years before they even initially closed when we worked together before. So, but yeah, we've just kind of kept in contact over the years and they were ready to do something again.
Wow, that's pretty interesting,
Yeah.
because I feel like sometimes when I reach out to somebody and they don't close within the first week, then they're not going to ever close. Does anybody else ever feel that way? I mean, but 2 years, you're following up with them for over 2 years before they actually became a
Yes.
customer. Is that something you typically see? Is that normal?
It happens, yes. And I think, as long as you continue to call them and touch base every few months or so, and I'll ask them too, is it okay if I call you back in a few months? And they usually say yes. You never know what can happen. And if they are ready before you call them, the time that they say yes, they're going to remember you and they'll reach out to you a lot of times first.
Hmm. That's awesome. Okay, cool. And we're going to get into the process a little bit that you follow in terms of the outreach and the follow up and all that stuff. But I think, you did mention where you worked at before, you worked with them before. So I think it would be good to give people just kind of a brief bio of your journey, of like where you started doing, or I mean, you didn't start out doing sales, but then eventually you started working in sales, not for an agency. And maybe you could kind of give them a little bit of a brief introduction into how you got started with that. And then even when you got into digital marketing.
Yeah, sure. So I worked for Comcast for about 4 or 5 years on the mainland. So I worked with small businesses and sold them internet, cable, and phone services. And then when I moved out to Hawaii about 8 years ago, I worked on a sailboat for about a solid year. And so I just kind of wanted to take a step back and kind of get acclimated here. And then I was working for a much larger digital marketing company and I liked it. Maybe about 4 years ago, Nick and I kind of kept seeing each other's name all over Maui. So I would run into clients that he was working with and vice versa. So one morning, we were kind of, taking some of each other's clients, not intentionally, but that's just kind of the nature of the business. That's what was happening. And so I woke up to an email one day from him that said, "Hi, Megan, this is Nick Ponte. I was wondering if you wanted to meet." So we met for coffee and just kind of, talked about how we might be able to potentially help each other out. And there were certain products that Nick sold that I was not able to sell. So over the years, I referred him a few things. And
Hmm.
then earlier this year, go ahead.
Hold on. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. It's good to get her perspective on this because that's actually it's all true, but that's not how it really happened for me. What happened for me on my end is I kept seeing Megan's name from my clients. My clients were hitting me up. My existing clients were like, "Hey, this company contacted me. This woman called me, and they were saying that we need to do SEO or we need to run ads, and that we should work with them." And they were like, and multiple people, mind you, like I think maybe 3 clients actually told me about her specifically, about Megan, and I don't believe you weren't like calling my clients. I think you
No.
just call everybody, right?
Yes.
That's part of
Yes.
your process. Okay, so that's
Yes.
something to be said. And obviously Maui's a pretty small place, right, everybody? So you have to keep that in mind. And she's actually located in Honolulu. So we're on separate islands. And so she's prospecting on my island.
Yes.
And so I saw that I had the final straw that broke the camel's back, if you will, was when I went to one of my clients' place of business. And something that I regularly do is like I go to my clients and I buy their products or I buy their services or I eat at the restaurant if I can, because that's the spirit of helping local business. So if any of you aren't doing that, then definitely do that. And so I went there and he was like, "Hey, somebody came in the other day and they were talking about doing SEO, and I told them I worked with you, and I was like, who was it? And he said, Megan. And I'm like, Megan, man, it's like her name keeps coming up. And he's like, yeah, I have her card. And he gave me her card. And so I reached out, and I don't really know exactly, I can't tell you why I reached out. I just wanted to, it was curiosity to be, I think that's what it was. It was just general curiosity because of, it caught my attention, right? Like this person out there actively reaching out to businesses, it just caught my attention. So I wanted to put a face to the name and see what she was doing, and just hear more about it. And I think a lot of people, I don't know if they'd really call their competition, right? I could have looked at it as her being a competitor and not want to actually reach out. But I didn't look at it that way. Just like, hey, this person's in the same industry as me. We could probably have a friendly conversation, maybe share some notes on some things. It is what it is. I could probably learn a thing or two from her. So I think my, general curiosity of the situation allowed this, relationship to develop. And so for those of you that are looking for, salespeople and prospecting people, that might be something that might be helpful. Just having that general curiosity in terms of people that you could be potentially working with or might already be in the industry. So yeah, okay. So we had coffee one day. We had met for coffee and we talked a little bit, and she was working for another digital marketing company at the time. Yeah, like you said, this is something that stood out to me about Megan is we were like selling higher price points, custom websites, which a lot of and sell as well, and they weren't selling that. So she would come across some people that wouldn't fall in line with the products that she was selling, and she sent in probably 2 or 3 referrals to me before we even were working together, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So then, pick up where did we leave off from there? So you were working for a while. That was years ago.
Yeah, I think it was about 4 years ago, but I vividly remember having left that meeting with Nick, and I had actually called my husband and I said, I really want to work with him someday, because we just, had a good connection. And I left that meeting just kind of feeling good about what we had talked about. And then I worked for the other company, and they had got bought out earlier this year and kind of changed the direction of, what they were doing. And
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you again, Megan. I think
yeah.
One question, is there anything that stood out to you, like about my approach or what I said to you, that made you feel that way? Because I know a lot of people here, they're probably looking to have some conversations like this, and maybe, they speak with somebody that already works for somebody else. What was it that stood out that like made you think about, have that interest?
I think the fact that I had seen your name as well, and then to get an email from you, the fact that you actually, were willing to do that, where a lot of people would have maybe looked at it as like a threat or competition. Yes, it was, but there could have been benefits to us meeting. And I saw that too. And I appreciated that you took that first step to actually schedule, a time to talk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah. And you never know, right? Like you never know until you try. So some of you, you may have somebody that you're thinking about reaching out to, and it may not be somebody that's already in the industry. It might be somebody that, that's just looking to make some extra cash or has some free time. Like I encourage you to have that conversation, because you don't know what could really come from it. That curiosity is so important. So sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
So then I left when the company I was with got bought out, Nick was one of the first people that I called, and I just kind of told him what was going on. And we just decided we were going to work together from there. And so I think it's been great so far.
Yeah, it has been great. And actually something you just said really stood out to me. So when I met with Megan at that time, she had a job, and I wasn't trying to like steal her or anything like that. That wasn't my intention. I didn't think that would be very cool, and I, her skills already caught my attention. And so I knew that when I left that meeting, that's actually exactly how we left it. I said, I know you have a job right now, and you have some other things going on right now, but like in the future, if you need something else, or you're looking for something else, give me a call. We can see what can happen. And I think it's important to note because, if you make sure, and this could be with your prospects, people that you meet with, that they know who to call when they need your services, or when they are looking to work with somebody else, that you're the first person. You make sure that you're the first person that they should call. Like, that's going to be good, because a lot of times with clients, and Megan, maybe you can speak to this, people say like, my nephew does our social media marketing, so we don't need anybody to do it. And like, I don't just, bash the nephew or anything, or try to like steal the business still. I just make sure that when the nephew isn't doing the job that they should be doing, or they think quality could be better, they know who to call when they need help. Don't you think?
Yeah, for sure.
Just always leave that open. So, okay, cool. So yeah, we started working together about 4 months ago. Let's see. And so you've been here, I think the first month you brought in quite a bit of business. I don't really have the numbers off the top of my head, but we set a quota of, what's our quota right now in terms of new clients per month or cash collected?
It's 2,200, and then either 2 to 3 new clients.
Right. So
in addition to what comes in as a lead.
Yes. So her quota right now, everybody, is that, and I, encourage you all to make sure when you hire somebody that you give them a benchmark, something that they should hit, right? 2 to 3 new clients per month, or $2,200 in, I think it's actually residual, right? So $2,200 in residual income collected, if not mistaken, not one-off services.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And so for me, as the business owner, I'm always focused on building that, the retainer type income that we can have in our business, because, long term, obviously, that's what helps us to make more long-term decisions when we have some cash flow coming in. Let's see. So I'm looking to see if there's any questions here. Richard said, this is a Banksy. It's not an original. You're talking about this painting, Richard. Yeah, it's definitely not an original. Bruce says, how did she reach out? Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. So actually you've been in somewhat of a leadership management role before at your other company, right?
Correct.
Just briefly, like, can you talk about that for a second? Because I know you've done a lot of sales and prospecting. People have taught you before. You've also taught some people as well. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And so, yeah, I mean, what people want to know is like, what does your day-to-day look like? Like, what are your numbers? What do you try to do? Let's get that discussion going, because that's what everyone's already asking.
Yeah, for sure. So I had a boss at the previous company that I worked with who was the most wonderful mentor as far as, kind of outlining what was needed to be done to succeed in the sales role. And so he basically said, you need to make 50 calls a day, to schedule 8 to 10 appointments per week, to get 1 close per week. And that's what's going to help you to hit your goal. So when I first started, and, I didn't have any meetings lined up for the first, several weeks, I was doubling that number. So I would, do 100 calls a day to get those 8 to 10, to get the 1 close a week, to hit the monthly goal. Now, as kind of time went on with the company, the goals got higher. So when I started training new reps, I would tell them that they needed to make more than that. Or if they were finding that they were not hitting their goals, then they needed to look back. Okay, well, did I have the 8 to 10 appointments a week? And did I have the, 50 calls? Or at that point, I think I was telling them, 70 to 80, because our goals had gone up. And if they were not, hitting those benchmarks, then they kind of needed to dial it back to step 1, which was the calls. And so when I'm making my calls, I do very minimal research prior to reaching out to somebody, because you're not going to talk to, 50, 60, 70 80 people a day. You're going to get voicemails. You're going to get, people that are not the decision makers. And so as I was calling, what I would do is maybe then I would start kind of pulling up some Google searches or have a price point that, I needed to speak, or not a price point, a pain point that I needed to speak with them about. And so I would always kind of, call it like a formula. So what formula works for you? Maybe it's not 50 calls a day. Maybe it's not 60 calls a day. Maybe it is 100 initially. But as you're kind of, getting in your groove and you have 3-4 months under the belt, even after a year, you might not have to be making that many to hit those 8 to 10 appointments to get that one close a week. You might not even need 8 to 10 appointments. But that's what I was told initially to kind of help to set me up for success. And it worked. And there would be, if there were months that were slower, that, maybe I wasn't closing as much as I would used to, I would take a look back at what I actually did to get me there or not get me there, or get, less than what I was used to hitting. And it always dialed back to that initial activity, or, maybe not even speaking with the right people during those calls. So I think that we would always tell like our new reps that if you have nothing to go out and close, you're not going to hit your goals. So step one was always just getting them to just hammer the phones for the first several weeks. And then, once they started getting the appointments, then it was, we would have somebody that would go with them that would help them and then help them close initially. But they weren't making those closes if they didn't have those appointments set up from the calls that they made.
So something that you stuck out to me is, that you do very minimal research on your calls. And, I think so many times, at least in my perspective and people that I work with, like, we think we need to have the best lead. We need to do all this research. We need to go deep and figure out who they are. But that's not the case for the first call, at least, right? So,
Right.
So because I know you go for like a 2-call close at least, right? Is that generally what it is? So
Typically, yes.
So you put together your list, and you put together your own list. That's something else that I want to point out to all of you as well. Megan puts together her own lists. Like, I've tried to give her software. I've tried to give her lead tools. Like, we all have all these amazing lead tools. I've given you one of my lead tools. Have you ever even used it ever?
Not really.
Not really. Which if she did, we all know she would crush it, right? Because I mean, you're able to pull these lists like overnight, hundreds of them, if not thousands. So how are you building your lists?
So that's a big part of my day too, especially like in the beginning, when I kind of first started doing this, is every morning I would add new prospects to basically an Excel spreadsheet. And I would literally just write down the business name and
not go high level, right? By the way.
Yes, yeah. But then I will put it into go high level once I get movement on it. But the Excel spreadsheet.
Only since you met me. You met me. Before you met me, you were doing like Excel sheet and spreadsheets and paper as well.
Salesforce. I did put it into Salesforce afterwards, but.
Okay.
Yeah. So I basically generate my own list, and I'll just go, I'll go to Yelp. I'll look up, restaurants, Maui, tour companies, in this area. I like to call tourism a lot. It's my favorite industry to work with. And, just different industries. I'll even look on Google. If I'm actually on a call with somebody and I see other businesses on Google, I'll like write them down on a piece of paper and add them to my list later. I take pictures of trucks, of businesses when I'm driving down. So I really just pull from anywhere, but I would say, especially in the beginning, I was adding probably at least 50 to 100 every day. I would do that from like 8 to 8:30 in the morning. And even now there's days that I will try and, just always add prospects to my list. It doesn't mean that I'm always going to get them to them that day or even that week. I might not get to them for a month because I have everything else on my list. but I'm still always making sure that I'm adding to that list. Now I'd say more like on a weekly basis, but in the beginning it was a daily basis.
Okay, cool. And you're always prospecting is what stuck out to me, and when I was doing the sales and the agency side, I was doing the same, like I said, the businesses that I frequent, my clients, like all the restaurants that I go to, like I try to figure out who owns them, your barber shop, your pet groomer, like, these people, they recognize your face, and it's an easy conversation. These are like the low hanging fruit. Wouldn't you agree, Megan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. And
Okay,
I've
so
actually found, oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh no, go for it.
I think over the years, and I will say some of the lists that Nick has given me, like a lot of what has been on some of like the tourism lists you pulled, I had on my list. So I think your lists are more solid than ones I have seen in the past. But I have always just felt like the leads that I have generated on my own were better than a lot of, lists that I had been given, with the previous company that I was with. So I personally found that they were, easier to close for whatever the reason. But the list that Nick has generated have been pretty solid from what I've looked at on them.
And it actually almost sounds like to me that you have lists for when you initially reach out, but then you progress people from like the original list to like other segments of a list of people that you continue to, like, maybe you make a contact with them. So those people you still continue to follow up with, I mean, for 2 years or even longer at times, right?
Yes, correct. So if somebody says, and I am doing this in Go High Level now too, but if somebody says, call me, in 2-3 months down the road, like I will move them to the next segment of my list. And then they're not junking up the current list that I'm working off of. And then I also kind of move them in phases. If they seem pretty serious and say, I really do need this, but we are not going to be looking into this for a couple of months, I'll go so far as to also make a note in my calendar to make sure that I reach out to them. So I also, every morning, I have something in my calendar at 7 a.m. that says, call the following. And those are my priorities that I need to get to in that day, whether it's a deal I've been working that I know I need to follow up with on that day, or a prospect that told me 2 months ago, call me on this day in 2 months. So I have it in multiple places so that I'm not missing anything, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good stuff. And I hope, everybody, if you have questions coming up while we're talking too, just put them in the chat and we'll make sure to circle back around and answer them. So, you put together your list, you're always putting together your list, and, basically every day, correct if I'm wrong, you will sit down and start to contact that list and do an initial outreach. So what does that look like? What's your goal for the initial outreach? What do you say? Like, what does that look like?
So I call, I say, I'm Megan, I'm giving you a call from Nick Ponce Marketing. And then because Hawaii is so local, I always say, we're in Maui, but I'm on Oahu. Or if I'm here, I'm on Maui this week, I'll say we're in Kihei. I was trying to get a hold of whoever handles your online marketing for the business. And then once I get that person on the phone, it kind of just opens up a conversation. Usually I'll start by asking if they have anybody helping them with that. And they're going to say yes or no. If they say yes, then okay, well, what exactly are they doing? If they say no, then I tell them a little bit about what we do. And I ask for the appointment pretty quickly. If they say yes, then I will qualify it and make sure that it's worth it to actually be meeting with that person.
Okay, so this is a key point, everybody. The first call is really to schedule an appointment. You're not selling anything on the first call?
No.
Okay. Even if somebody, I mean, have you ever sold anything on the first call? I mean, I'm sure it's maybe happened, but.
Very rarely, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I do like to do my research and everything before, before actually the meeting then. So it has happened, but very, very rarely.
Mm-hmm. So your goal is to schedule an appointment with the decision maker about, the business that can actually have a conversation with you. And you said qualified. So what does that mean for you? Like, how would this appointment be qualified or this person be qualified?
So I always ask them, what services they're currently using, what they're currently doing for their digital marketing. And then I'll try and get a budget. If they're like, oh, we're doing a Yelp ad. Oh, okay, well, how much are you spending on that Yelp ad? So then like now I'm getting an idea, because if I come and ask them flat out for a budget and they're like, well, we don't really have one, or we don't know, I do know that they've been spending money on other sources and they've told me what they've spent on them. And then I always ask if there's anybody else that should be in the meeting, if there's any other decision makers. And I think this is an uncomfortable question to ask, but I do try and say, if this makes business sense, is this something that you would, move forward with when we meet? And so that's kind of the information that I'll gather to make sure that it's qualified enough that it's going to be worth going out there. If I feel like for some reason it's not, and maybe it's more informational, then I would rather schedule like a phone meeting or a Zoom call initially. And then, that will give me the opportunity to kind of feel them out a little bit more. And then I might schedule that in person. I prefer the in person, but if for some reason I think it's, going to be a waste of time, then maybe I'll do like the informational, because I do think sometimes those can turn into something as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you also close a lot of deals, and this is also something that stuck out to me about you, is like you do like to go meet people at their place of business, but at the same time, you close a lot of deals never meeting people ever.
Yes.
So I think that's just like your skill set. I don't think, and since you've worked with a lot of people in this realm, you know a lot of other salespeople that do digital marketing. Like, does everybody opt to meet them in person, or do most people do it like from their laptop?
So I think now, especially over the past couple of years, a lot of people are like, oh, like we can just do a Zoom. And I'm like, no, please let me get out of my house and come and see you. But if they want to do that, if they want to do that, that's fine. I just, I think in person goes a long way. Like even, Jean, the coffee guy that we're working, I think like I was over on the Big Island. I had a chance to meet with him. And I think that was very helpful in closing that deal, because he was a little bit, skeptical. So I prefer the in-person, but I do think a lot of people, are preferring the Zoom. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point too, is like on the consumer side, the customer side, they almost do prefer to just meet Zoom. They don't even want to meet in person anymore. So do you actually have to push for that sometimes? Like, hey, I actually want to come to your place of business.
Yeah, I'll say like I prefer in person, but if it's more convenient, we can do that. Yeah.
That's funny. That's really funny. Okay, so you have your list, you make your calls, you try to set appointments. You're doing 50 calls. What were the metrics again? 50 calls.
So initially I would say like, I was told 50 calls for the 8 to 10, but I was honestly doubling that.
Yeah, I was going to say 50 calls for 8 to 10 schedules. That's really, really good.
Yeah. And then as time went on, I don't need to make that many anymore. Especially like yesterday, I had 4 meetings. I didn't do any cold calling yesterday because I didn't have time to. I was sending out the proposals, but that means today, I have 1 and then I have a 5 o'clock. So I'll have time to kind of make up for what I didn't, cold call yesterday. So maybe today I'll make, 60 calls in between the meetings that I have. So it's just, you want to average that out by the end of the week though, whatever your formula is.
Yeah. This is actually pretty funny. So Bruce Mayo, rocking the Remote Millionaires t-shirt, by the way. I love that, Bruce. He says he's drinking his Kona coffee right now. I think he did. Did you buy some off of the Hollow Tree website, Bruce?
I did, and it's really good. So this is the 100% Peaberry.
Nice. So yeah, Megan, when you brought in that deal, I discussed a little bit of that with
Good
them.
job, Megan.
Yeah. So
you like it?
I do. It's great coffee. Great coffee.
Awesome. Thanks for helping us out with the retention there, Bruce.
Hey, I'm trying to help keep you in business. So
yeah, appreciate that. Okay, so you go for the schedule, you make sure that they're qualified, and then so what does the in-person meeting or the Zoom call look like for you? What's your goal there, and how do you prepare for that? Maybe we could start before there. How do we prepare for that?
So I set it up the same every single solitary time. I pull up some Google Sheets, like I'll do some Google search results. I'll pull up their Google business profile. I'll pull up their website for sure. And then, I usually pitch everything unless it's circumstantial, like maybe they have like an in-house person for something that they're like 100% not going to switch over. But I usually pitch everything. But what I make a point in doing is I probably spend about, I'd say like between 5 and 10 minutes explaining how Google works and the different sections of Google. So by the time I start talking about products, they're like, okay, we need this because she said that. So I spend very minimal time talking about the products. It's more like kind of educating them on why they need to be on Google and showing them that they're not, if they're not popping up for certain searches, and why it's important to have a presence in all 3 of the sections, the ads, the maps, and then to have their site ranking organically. So by the time I'm actually explaining, the products that we offer, it makes sense to them because of how I set them up with explaining how the sections of Google work.
Okay, cool. So it's more, the beginning is more of just like you find out what they're doing, kind of ask them how it's going. Obviously it's not going well, then that's great for you because you can say, okay, well, we can do better, of course. So then once you figure out what they're doing or not doing, then you go through a bit of an education process. So do you take your computer in with you, or you pull something up in person, or when you're on Zoom, do you just kind of share your screen and do some search results looking for them and kind of point those things out and show them where they're at?
Yeah, correct. And to your point, I did in the beginning, I do actually spend about like 10 minutes of a discovery, like even deeper than what I did on the initial cold call. And then I'll do the Google search results. And yes, I bring in my computer if it's an in-person meeting. And then if it's on Zoom, I'm just pulling up the same exact thing and sharing my screen.
Gotcha. And actually, Megan, I'm gonna put you on the spot here, and I hope it's okay that I say this.
Yeah.
Because you are a self-proclaimed not technical person.
No,
and
I'm not.
so, and I think that's important to point out, right? Because you take your computer in with you and you go over some Google searching and you show people like where they are or where they're not, and you close a lot of sales, and so I think that's important to point out, because a lot of people feel like, when you're selling, that you need to be that technical person that is actually building the websites. But I mean, have you ever built a website?
No, I ask you questions about them all the time.
But what do you think it is that makes you feel so comfortable about selling the websites?
Because I know why they need it. And you're explaining to the client why they need the site. All the back end things, I don't think a sales rep needs to know everything. Like, yes, you need to know it to a certain extent, but you don't know every single like detail about what the wizards that are actually doing the work are doing. And I think if you go down a rabbit hole with that, you're going to lose a lot of people anyway. So I think keeping it simple and just kind of explaining like, this is why you need a website. This is why you need to update your website. This is why we need to get your site to rank. As long as you can explain those things, you're good.
Yeah. And okay, so I mean, it also has to do with the fact that, you have the wizards in the background, right? Like you have people on your team, Adriana, Nirav, Connor, the people on our team that are helping deliver the actual work on these products. So you have confidence in your team and their ability to help deliver on the things that you're selling. And so does that come through in your sales process?
Yes. I mean, I definitely talk about both of them and kind of what is going to, happen after. We have somebody that sends over reports. They're very detailed. I kind of go a little bit and I will show some examples too of some of the reports that they might get sent. And then I'll talk about Connor. We have somebody that's constantly watching your ad. The ad's not just on autopilot, and we'll talk a little bit more about like what he's actually doing. And I think that also is a selling point as well. So now they know like okay, I need this because it's going to do X, but I have people that are actually going to do those things to get me here.
Mhm. Nice.
And that's all they need
Nice.
to know, like that's the basis of it, I think.
Yeah. And people that are new, that are just looking to try to get some clients immediately, that don't have a lot of experience. It's why, like in Remote Millionaires, what I actually show people to do is start building their team first, building relationships first, before they even have any clients, so that when they do go out and start prospecting and talking to people, they know that they have Connor, that they have Nirav, that they have those departments figured out. So when they do make the sale, they don't have to worry about it, or
Yes,
they can worry about it less, because they don't have to go learn how to build a website. They can lean on this expert that they've already started this, relationship with.
right.
Cool. Let's see. Are there any questions that came in? Let me pull the, was there anything that you wanted to add on that, or you wanted to run into some of these questions real quick?
No, you can go on the questions.
Okay. So Bill says, how do you handle the follow-ups? I've had several good initial calls, and the prospect tells me to send info, and once I send the info, I get ghosted. How do you handle this?
So this is something else I used to tell our reps, like a lot of times if someone's like on the phone, oh, can you send me over examples or this and that, you're never going to hear from them again. They're going to look at that and you're not going to get a chance to kind of explain to them exactly, what it all means. So I send like a very general email, just again, kind of saying, this is who we are. This is some examples of what we do. A couple examples of maybe, businesses that we work with that are already on the website that they could go and, see themselves if they went to our site. And then, if they express enough interest to ask me to send over an email, I will then call them in a couple of days. I'll put them on that little calendar note that I have and say, I talked to you a couple of days ago. Did you have a chance to review the email that I sent over? But I never send pricing an email. I will not get pricing over the phone at all, unless I'm actually having the meeting with them and am getting into that at the end. And I think if you're just sending over a pricing sheet, 9 times out of 10, it's going to scare them away.
Okay. So why don't you, like, why do you think that scares them away, or why do you wait? Like, what are you waiting for, like, to actually reveal the pricing?
So I think, every business and every industry is different, and their goal, like you have to have a deeper conversation with them to understand what their goals are, what their budget is. And then based off of that information, I usually will make 3 recommendations. I'll do like an aggressive, a competitive, and a conservative when I send over the proposal after I talk to them. And I think, like if somebody is in a position where they do not need a ton more business for, they don't want their phone ringing off the hook, but they want to just kind of clean up their presence a little bit, then I might not sell them a Google Ads package, because if they're going to be turning away every single person that calls them, then that might not be what I recommend them. But I'm not going to know that until I have, a deeper conversation with them. And then, even when I do send over the different recommendations, I always explain to them, these prices are not like the end all be all. We can kind of, I schedule a follow-up call then after that, to go over the proposals together and kind of come to an agreement on what fits the best for them.
So when you say proposals, like, I haven't seen any like proposals come out of you. What are you talking about here?
So I'll basically send in like the body of the email, and then I'll just kind of like, that's my proposal. Like I'll say, this is option 1. You can get this SEM package with this SEO for a total price point of X. And then I'll kind of explain, what each of those products are underneath. And then I'll give them a competitive and a conservative option that are below that.
Yeah. So it's just like a summary of like what you talked about in an
Correct.
email.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. And so, obviously I'm kind of trying to tease this information out from you. Like this is all stuff I know, but I'm trying to get it from you so people see that it's coming from somebody else too, because sometimes I feel like if I'm just saying things are the way they are, then I'm in, some people might think that I'm just in some echo chamber, but that's not the way it is. Like we used to send out very, high level, top shelf proposals. Man, Tom used to spend tons of time building those proposals, and people would just not respond to them. A total waste of time. I'm not saying that there isn't a time and a place to do one of those. That's usually in a more corporate setting when you're working with like a business that has a board of directors and they need something physical to get approval from 10 other people on. Like those people are going to need some sort of something. They might need a little more of an informal email, but 9 out of 10 times, wouldn't you agree, Megan, working with the smaller local businesses, it's just overkill?
I do agree. And I even think to your point, when I used to send over proposals before, I think they just went way over people's head, like the actual like documents with detailed information. So I just think keeping it simple. I actually have like an email template saved that says proposals and pricing. So after I meet with somebody, I'll like copy that and then I'll just kind of tweak it based off of what we talked about.
Oh, does anybody, would you be willing to share that with us? Does anybody want to see those
I
two
can.
templates by chance? Yeah. I see a lot of heads going like this. Cool. I'll make sure to share that with you all.
Hey, Nick,
Hey, who's that?
I wanted to just kind of follow up. I probably should have worded my question a little bit clearer. Both these clients called me asking me for my service. I was providing printing, and I explained to them what the process was and everything else. And then they said, okay, well, send me over the pricing and then we'll go from there. And now I can't get them to reply back. And it's been almost a week now. Do I just continue to email them?
And you've tried to call them too?
No, I have not tried to call because basically our email's been through Facebook Messenger.
Do you have a number for them?
I believe so. Yeah.
I would try and call and just say, I just wanted to touch base and see if you had a chance to look over the proposals that I sent.
The old calling again.
Yes, it works.
Yeah. And, Bill, it's, I don't like making calls myself, but I've made them, Megan, were you always comfortable making the calls? And you can, if you are, that's fine. But I'm curious, were you always comfortable making the calls? And then have you seen people that weren't comfortable become comfortable in your experience?
Yeah, I think when I first started, like, especially like being in an office with like 30 other people sitting around, we used to call it call reluctance for like the new sales reps. Like they would just sit there and kind of look at their phone all day and, just waiting for them to pick it up. But I think that that's really normal. But I think once like you kind of get in your flow with it, it really does just come naturally.
Yeah. Also, like it's a fear of the unknown. For me, what I realized and thinking it through is what helped me get over it and be able to get into the rhythm. And it's being able to think it through and be like, I'm making these calls. What's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that could happen, Bill?
Well, they might kill me. I don't know.
They might kill you. They might reach through the phone and kill you. Right?
No, just with me, it's just, I think still I fall back on just that one question I won't be able to answer and it'll jack me up. So
how do you deal with a question that you can't answer, Megan?
I flat out say, I actually don't know the answer to that. Let me get back to you. And I think people appreciate honesty, when it comes to that. If I know enough about it that I can kind of like talk a little bit, I will. But then if it's something that I like yesterday, for example, I had like a whole list of them for you that I'm not going to tell somebody the wrong information and then have them upset later. So I'd rather know for sure. And then I'll get back to them and let them know what I find.
Mm-hmm. And have you ever had anybody say, no, that's unacceptable. I need an answer right now.
No.
Yeah. So Bill, and we all know this, right? It's just, that's what we also don't like people saying no, that for me, like, I don't want people to tell me no. I don't want to get on the phone and offer this thing and hear a no, like that will stop me from starting. But, you know, at the end of the day, like I know what my goals are, you know, and the goals are to bring in more clients. And the worst thing could happen is that maybe you get a no, you know, and so what? That person's going to hang up. You're going to hang up. Both of you are going to move on with your day. And I don't think you'll ever remember it, you know? So if you can keep that in the forefront of your mind, like this phone call isn't going to hurt me. Can actually, I mean, it's a pretty high chance that only good things can come from this phone call, you know? And you just kind of get the reps in from doing that. That's why we always like to get people to, you know, if they have that, what did you call it? Call reluctance,
Yeah.
to start out by who here has feels like they have call reluctance? Show of hands. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So if you have call reluctance, I think it's a great way to start is to just start. You know, don't try to do too much at once. Make 5 calls today. Set a goal of making 5 calls today. And Megan probably laughed at me for saying 5 calls because that's, you know, little. But to me, like, you know, somebody that had a huge fear of making calls, I think the gradual baby steps gave me that confidence, you know. And if that's what you need to do to build that confidence, just make 5 calls today. Tomorrow you make 10, the next day you make 15, and just increase by 5 each day. I promise you, by the end of the week, you're going to feel a lot better about making those calls, you know. And if you're one of those people out there like really, really needs to make this work, you've been, you know, banging your head against the wall for quite some time and still can't bring in customers, like that is a small thing that you can do every single day to radically improve your chances of bringing in a new client, you know. And if you bring in a new client, you don't know what to do with them, well, you know, that's what we're here for. Like, go to Slack and say, hey, Nick, I got this new client. What do I do? I'm going to show you exactly how to do everything that you need to do. Right. So, yeah, that's a good bit of info there. Let's see. So if somebody asks you, I want to circle back around. Somebody asks for pricing. You said you don't give pricing on the first call. So what do you say? Well, how much does this service cost?
I always say, you know, we actually don't have a pricing sheet. The reason being is because everything that we offer is custom to each individual business. The services we offer are a la carte, and then we also have different tiers. And then I'll say typically, you know, what I'll do is after we have our call, I'll make some recommendations. And usually I can work with somebody's budget on something that makes sense for them. And I have never once had somebody be like, no, you need to give me a price right now. Actually, I think one time, and it was somebody I wouldn't have wanted to work with anyway, but typically people are pretty like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I'll send it in an email too. If I get an email response and can you send me a pricing sheet? That's what I'll respond with.
Okay. And I'm sure you've gotten some pushback in this, like an example, but like, you can't even give me a ballpark pricing.
Okay. So then at that point, I'll say, like, you know, we have some clients that are spending $500 a month. And then I have clients that are spending, you know, thousands. And that is what I will say to that question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I like what you did there because it lets them know that there is a minimum, you know, of like around 500, but then if they want to be more aggressive, then, you know, they can spend more too. So it doesn't completely rule out either which way. So that's good.